In the year 675, the Emperor of Japan gave an order: no cattle, no horses, no dogs, no monkeys, no chickens. And for the next 1200 years, one of the greatest food cultures on Earth would be built almost entirely without meat. But here is the part that makes no sense. When an emperor finally sat down in public and ate a single piece of beef to end the ban, monks stormed his palace and men died at the gate. How does a nation give up meat for 12 centuries and then nearly riot when it is finally handed back? In the year 675, an early Japanese emperor recorded a decree in Japan's oldest chronicle. He forbade the eating of cattle, horses, dogs, monkeys, and chickens across the farming months from roughly the 4th month through the 9th. It wasn't a suggestion, and it was law that would shape Japanese tables for the next 12 centuries. Later, rulers made the wall higher still. Empress Gensho and Emperor Shomu added their own bans in 721 and 736. Over time, what began as a seasonal restriction hardened into something that looked like a civilization-wide vow. We are told the ban was about religion, about compassion for every living thing. And it was. Buddhism had arrived from China and Korea in the 6th century, and it taught that all living beings deserved protection. The idea of transmigration meant an animal you killed might be a reincarnated ancestor. Killing was not just cruel, it was a risk to your own family across lifetimes. Native Shinto added its own force. Blood and death were pollution, and meat carried both into the body and into the home. An emperor who sponsored Buddhism and enforced purity performed his own fitness to rule, and the court used diet to separate civilized life from the barbaric. But look closer. The two most commonly eaten meats in Japan, deer and wild boar, were quietly left off the list, and both were used as offerings at the shrines. A ban that spares the most popular meats is not only about the soul, it is also, very quietly, about which animals a farmer could not afford to lose. Cattle and horses were the engines of the rice economy, the plough and the pack. To kill your ox for dinner was to eat your own harvest. Rice was the center of everything. It was wealth, tax, and ritual, all in one grain. Meat competed with that order, but fish and vegetables did not. Faith and the harvest, it turns out, wanted exactly the same thing. The cost didn't fall on everyone. Someone still had to tan the hides and handle the slaughter, and that work was pushed to a hereditary class at the margins of society. For centuries, they were among the only people who ate meat openly, and that openness deepened their exclusion. The ban was a rule about purity, but purity doubled as hierarchy, and the people who did the dirty work carried the stigma so that others could keep their hands clean. The official reason was faith, but the ban left behind one clue that faith alone cannot explain. It protected the soul and the harvest at the same time, and that's exactly why it lasted. Shrines demanded purification for anyone who had eaten meat, and the heaviest meats carried the heaviest penance. Some records describe up to 150 days of cleansing before a beef eater could stand again in a sacred space. The message was clear. Meat was not merely forbidden, it was a spiritual debt that separated you from the community and from the divine. So if a nation sets down meat for 1,000 years, the real question is not what it lost. It is what it built in its place. And what it built is on your table today. If you want to see what a whole nation eats when it gives up meat for 1,200 years, then stay with me and subscribe. This is where we sit with how Asia really lived, slowly, the way it deserves. For most of those centuries, the everyday Japanese table centered on rice, seasonal vegetables, tofu and other soy foods, seaweed, mushrooms, miso, and dashi. Flavor came from fermentation and the sea, not from fat. Every meal was built around what the season offered, and the Japanese developed a vocabulary of flavor that depended on the age of a pickle, the darkness of a soy sauce, and the quality of the kelp. Wild mountain vegetables appeared in spring, seaweed varieties changed with the temperature of the water, and mushrooms gathered from the forest floor brought an earthy depth that mimicked the savor of meat without ever touching it. The absence of meat didn't mean the absence of taste. It meant that all the invention had to flow into what remained, and the results became some of the most admired techniques on Earth. Soybeans were transformed into tofu in endless forms. Chilled, fried, freeze-dried, and ground into a rich sesame tofu that carried the richness of nuts without a single animal. Miso and soy sauce, produced through long fermentation, added depth and umami to vegetables and fish that no meat stock could surpass. Seaweed and dried bonito flakes built broths that became the foundation of soups and stews, and rice vinegar with pickling brines extended the life of simple ingredients while sharpening their flavor. A cuisine that could not lean on fat learned to lean on time, and the waiting became part of the taste. Buddhist temple cuisine turned restriction into an art form. The Buddhist temple cuisine, Shojin Ryori, was built entirely on local and seasonal plants, sesame tofu, and vegetable stews prepared with the same discipline as meditation. Temple meals were arranged to balance color, temperature, and texture, with 5 flavors and 5 colors represented in a single tray, not because it looked good on a photograph, but because harmony itself was a spiritual practice. A single meal might move from a clear soup to a simmered dish, a grilled plate, a steamed bundle, and a small bowl of rice, each item chosen because the garden or the market offered it that morning. Even samurai often ate this way when they weren't at war. The Zen master Dogen wrote that cooking itself could be the way, if performed with full presence and care. A cook who handled a vegetable with gratitude was practicing the same mind as a monk at prayer. Nothing was wasted and everything was respected because the restriction was not a prison. It was a discipline that trained the eye to see possibility in a root or a leaf. Fish and seafood were never banned, and that single exception drove Japan's deep, sophisticated seafood culture. The ban didn't starve Japanese cooking, it pointed it at the ocean. Sashimi, the early forms of sushi, and the whole silver harvest of the sea became the protein heart of a cuisine that would later make the world travel to taste it. Where other nations built their tables around pasture and herds, Japan built its around the current and the tide. Dashi, the clear broth of kelp and dried bonito, became the invisible backbone of nearly every dish, lending savor without heaviness. Coastal communities developed techniques for drying, fermenting, and preserving fish that turned a single catch into months of protein, while mountain villages relied on preserved vegetables, grains, and foraged plants. By the Edo period, the techniques of preserving fish had grown so sophisticated that a piece of dried mackerel or salted herring could carry more concentrated flavor than a fresh cut of meat from another country. The ocean wasn't a supplement, it was the main course, and over centuries, the Japanese learned to read it the way other farmers read the land. Of course, where the rules are this old, there are always ways around them. And the Japanese hid their forbidden meat inside a single clever word. Wild boar was called mountain whale, or yamakujira, so it could be eaten as if it were fish. Gibia was sometimes served as medicine, prescribed by a doctor to avoid the full weight of the taboo. In the city of Edo, shops openly sold what they called mountain whale, and the essays of the 1830s describe a flourishing trade in wild meat disguised behind polite language. The physician Matsumoto, who examined a company of warriors in the 19th century, is said to have found many of them weakened by poor nutrition, and he advised them to raise and eat pigs to recover their strength. Even the men who enforced the order sometimes needed what the order forbade. The rules bent, and the words bent with them. A civilization that couldn't say beef out loud learned to speak in code. Cookbooks from the early Edo period still contained recipes for the animals of the mountains, suggesting that the ban was observed most strictly by those who could afford the performance of purity, while others simply changed the name on the plate. And here is where a very old religious rule may have quietly done something its makers never intended. Many people today draw a line from centuries of this plant and fish, low-meat diet to Japan's later reputation for long life. The pattern is real and historical: rice, vegetables, soy, seaweed, and fish, decade after decade, century after century. The connection is not a promise and not a prescription. It is simply the observation that a people who built their meals on plants and the sea, and who ate meat only rarely and in secret, later became known for living a very long time. Whether the diet caused the reputation, or whether culture and genetics and calm also played their parts, is a question for scientists. But the pattern is there, and it's hard to ignore. Nobody in the year 675 was trying to optimize for lifespan. They were trying to save their souls. They may have accidentally saved their bodies. Nobody planned it. That is the rarest kind of good fortune, the kind no one can see until 1,000 years have passed. So here is my question for you. Could you give up meat for a single year, the way Japan gave it up for 12 centuries? Be honest. Tell me below. I read every answer. It turns out the richest tables are sometimes set by the very people who were told what they could not have. For 1,200 years, it held. And then, in a single generation, it all came apart. And it started at the very top. By the 19th century, Western ships had forced Japan's ports open, and the officials who met the visitors noticed something unsettling. The Westerners were physically larger, broader in the shoulder and taller in the frame, and the Japanese leadership decided, rightly or not, that meat played a part. Encounters with Westerners convinced many leaders that Western bodies were larger because they ate meat, and the government adopted the spirit of the age, wealthy country, and strong military, in which a stronger body meant a stronger nation. A modernizing government came to see meat-eating as civilization itself, and the old Buddhist taboo began to look like weakness. In January of 1872, the imperial court announced that Emperor Meiji had personally eaten beef and mutton. The emperor was regarded as a living deity, so his meal was designed as permission for a whole nation. The Meiji rebrand was deliberate and top-down. The court used the emperor's divine body as the nation's permission to eat meat. They reframed 1,000 years of vegetarianism as outdated and meat as modern and enlightened. They attached meat to national strength and military recruitment. They made it fashionable, so beef hot pot, or gyunabe, signaled cosmopolitan status in the new Tokyo. And they enlisted reform intellectuals to promote meat as part of the civilized life. The state ran a campaign framing the old way as backward and meat as a patriotic duty. The same food that had been filthy the year before was now a symbol of enlightenment. The campaign did not merely permit meat, it made it aspirational. But you do not undo 1,000 years of belief with one royal dinner, not without a fight. In one notable incident, 10 monks broke into the Imperial Palace, claiming that foreign meat eating was destroying the soul of the Japanese people. Several died during the break-in, and the rest were arrested. The monks who stormed the palace were ascetics who believed that foreign influence was corrupting the Japanese spirit. Their deaths weren't an isolated protest. They were the climax of 1,000 years of belief colliding with a single generation of change. The image to hold is this: men dying at the palace gate over a piece of beef. That is how deep the 1,000-year vow had gone. The state won, of course. The modernization project was too powerful, and the imperial will was absolute. But the violence at the gate proved that not everyone agreed the old way was backward, and not everyone was ready to let it go. Which leaves us with the strangest question of all. For 1,200 years, Japan asked a question almost no nation dares to ask. What happens to a people who give up the one thing everyone else builds their table around? The answer was not hunger. It was tofu and miso and the whole silver harvest of the sea, and in the end, a way of eating that the world now crosses oceans to taste. The ban was meant to protect the soul. What it may have quietly protected was the body. And on the day they finally set it down, some of them understood exactly what was being lost. If this was worth your time, then subscribe and stay a while. There are more of these hidden rules behind how Asia truly ate, and the next one is already being prepared. And if you want to know the economics of being an emperor, watch this video next.